Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the horror crime films from 2024, titled Long Legs. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. The movie begins in the 1970s, with a car driving down a road, before stopping in front of a snow-covered house. A little girl notices the car, and becomes intrigued, so she takes out her Polaroid camera. As she walks towards the vehicle, she hears a voice and abruptly turns around. The girl is then confronted by a tall man with extremely pale skin. He calls her the almost birthday girl, and mentions that he is wearing his long legs today. The scene then cuts to 20 years later, where we see a detective named Lee Harker attending an FBI meeting. She and her partner are assigned to conduct house-to-house interviews in search of a serial murder suspect. When they arrive in the neighborhood, Lee senses something strange, and points to a random house, saying the killer is inside. She suggests they call in reinforcements, but her partner advises her not to act on a hunch on the first day of their assignment. Since Lee is very certain, he agrees to go check the house and take a look. But as soon as the door opens, the killer shoots him dead, and Lee begins to panic. She calms herself down, and cautiously enters the house to catch the perpetrator. Much to her shock, the man is sitting on his bed, ready to surrender without resistance. In the next scene, Lee undergoes a series of psychological tests to determine if she has psychic abilities. We later see her sitting in a car with her superior, Carter, and Agent Browning. Carter is impressed by how Lee predicted the numbers correctly multiple times during the test. They believe she has psychic abilities, and want her help to solve a complicated case. Carter then informs Lee about the Longlegs case, which is related to a series of murders. He reveals that each case involves a father who murdered his wife and daughter, before taking his own life. A coded letter, signed Longlegs, is always left behind at each scene, but the handwriting doesn't match any of the family members. Carter also discusses the last case, in which the man stabbed his wife 61 times. He further reveals that they have 10 coded letters, and that 10 families have been slaughtered in this manner over the past 30 years. Browning is hesitant to assign this disturbing case to Lee, as she's just a rookie, but Carter insists they have no other option. Following this, Carter takes Lee to his office, and provides her with photos and documents about the victims' families. Lee inquires as to what all of these victim families had in common, and Carter reveals that each had a daughter born on the 14th of the month. Afterward, Lee gets to work and begins reviewing the case files and articles. She listens to an emergency call from the last case, where the father frantically claimed that his daughter was not his daughter. In the middle of the call, something appeared to take control of him, causing him to attack his family. We also see a series of graphic and disturbing images from the crime scene. While working on the case, Lee becomes exhausted and eventually falls asleep on the floor. Sometime later, Carter arrives to wake her up, and invites her for a drink. Lee begins to explain her findings. She reveals that there was no forced entry into the house, and that no one other than family members were present. All the victims were killed with objects already in the house, such as registered shotguns and kitchen knives. She speculates that Longlegs may have conditioned the fathers to commit such horrific acts. The two then leave the bar, and because Carter has had a drink, Lee drives him home. When they arrive, he invites her inside, and introduces her to his wife, Anna, and their little daughter, Ruby. Inside Ruby's room, the girl asks Lee if she always wanted to be an FBI agent, but Lee responds that she actually wanted to be an actress. The little girl Ruby then invites Lee to her upcoming birthday party, to which she accepts. After some time, Lee returns to her house in the middle of the woods, and calls her mother, Ruth. They speak for a while, and she reveals that she's stressed due to a disturbing case she's working on. Just then, there's a sudden knock on the door. This worries Lee, so she immediately ends the call. She checks outside through her window, and notices a figure in the distance. Seeing this, she heads outside with a gun, but doesn't see anyone. But then, she notices a figure inside her home, and quickly returns to confront the intruder, but finds that the person is gone. Instead, she discovers an envelope that says, "Do not open until January 14th. Regardless, Lee opens the envelope, and finds a letter from Longlegs wishing her a happy birthday. She also discovers an encrypted note, which she manages to decode with some effort. The note reveals a brutal warning from him, saying he will kill her mother. The following morning, the FBI team arrives at a crime scene, where another family has been murdered in the same way. A letter from Longlegs is also discovered on the scene. It turns out they were killed a month ago, but no one checked on them since they were about to leave for vacation. To add, the family's daughter's birthday is on the 14th of the upcoming month. They then proceed to the master bedroom, where Browning informs Lee and Carter that the father's body is in the garage, with a throat cut, that appears to have been done by himself. They also discover another dead family member. The body is so decayed and foul that flies are swarming all over it. The sight disturbs Lee deeply, and she later tells her mother that she's working on an unsettling case and will be very busy. Upon hearing this, Ruth urges her to go to church and pray, claiming that it will protect her from the devil. She also hopes to see Lee on her birthday, which is next week. Following this, Lee begins her investigation from the very beginning. She reads a book called The Circles of Hell, which explains how Satanists use a linear algorithm to mark important dates. Later, she meets with Carter and presents her findings. Lee reveals that each family had a 9-year-old daughter born on the 14th of the month, and the murders all took place within 6 days before, or after the birthday. When plotted on a linear calendar, the dates of these murders form the occult symbol of an inverted triangle, with only one date missing. This means that Longlegs is likely planning another murder on January 13th to complete the pattern. Carter is shocked by the information, but Lee states that she has also decoded the notes Longlegs has left over the years. It turns out that in almost all of these letters, he mentioned how much he enjoyed killing the Camera family 20 years ago. Back then, a man brutally murdered his wife on their family farm. He also killed a priest who happened to be there, before taking his own life. Fortunately, the daughter, Carrie Ann Camera, survived the massacre because she was at school. The girl has been traumatized since then, and is admitted to a psychiatric hospital. In the evening, the detectives decide to investigate the Camera family farm to see if they can find anything. They come across a few crosses, which lead them to the barn, and they eventually find a hidden compartment. Carter then removes the compartment's wooden plank, revealing a large life-size doll hidden inside. Afterward, they take the doll to forensics, where a doctor reveals that it is made of porcelain with human hair on the outside. He observes that it is handmade. A mysterious metal orb is also discovered inside the doll's head. When it is brought close to a magnet, it produces a peculiar sound that causes Lee to have a vision of several snakes. She also sees Longlegs creating the doll, and referring to it as Carrie Ann. In another scene, we see Longlegs goes to a supermarket, where he buys a few items. He then approaches a teenage clerk and begins acting strangely, making odd noises. The girl asks what he wants, but he inquires about her birth date instead. She then calls out to her father, claiming that the gross guy has returned. After he leaves the store, he throws a screaming fit and mocks the girl from earlier. Elsewhere, Lee and Carter visit the psychiatric hospital to meet Carrie Ann Camera. The manager mentions that no one had visited her in the last 20 years, but someone arrived for the first time yesterday. It turns out that Carrie was in a catatonic state, with no ability to interact with others. However, since yesterday, she has been completely healed. The detectives ask if he saw the visitor, but the manager reveals that he wasn't on site. They then check the previous day's log, and are stunned to see the name registered as Lee Harker. Afterward, Lee goes to the patient's room alone to speak with Carrie. To her surprise, Carrie immediately recognizes her, and claims to have seen her at the farmhouse. When asked about her childhood, Carrie mentions that her mother hated her and was disturbed, but her father was a good man. This is why he killed the mother. Carrie also states that she'll never forget the person who visited her yesterday. She claims that he asked her to do something important for a man who lives downstairs. Suddenly, Carrie reveals that she's willing to do anything for him, even if he asks her to jump out the window, or kill Lee with her bare hands. Hearing this, a disturbed Lee inquires about her childhood doll that looked just like her, but Carrie Ann doesn't recall it. The next day, Lee suggests to Carter that Longlegs may have implanted something in the doll to control the fathers, driving them insane and causing them to kill everyone. But Carter is skeptical, and finds it suspicious that the clues are now falling into place only after Lee joined the case. He has investigated her background, and reveals that something disturbing occurred on January 13, 1974, just a day before Lee's birthday. At that time, her mother had reported a strange, pale man bothering her daughter, but the complaint was never pursued. Carter questions Lee about the man, but she claims to have no memory of it. He then urges her to visit her mother to see if she knows anything. In the afternoon, Lee visits her mother, and finds her already waiting for her. Ruth then asks if she's praying, but Lee admits that she hasn't prayed in a long time because she's scared. She expects her mother to be upset, but Ruth bursts out laughing and says that prayer won't help anyway. After this, Lee goes to the kitchen to cook, but notices that her mother has saved her nails, teeth, and hair from when she was a child. Just then, she begins to have visions of snakes again, and recalls the day before her 9th birthday. Someone had intruded into their home at the time, which caused Ruth to panic. A confused Lee then asks her mother if she recalls anything from her 9th birthday, but she claims that she doesn't remember anything. Lee mentions that someone came into their house, but Ruth denies it and insists that no one ever came to see them. Frustrated, Lee enters her old bedroom, and discovers a box containing her childhood belongings. Among them are her old Polaroid camera and a few photographs. Through a flashback, we discover that the little girl from the beginning of the movie was Lee herself. She had been approached by Longlegs when she took his picture. But her mother soon noticed the weird man, and kicked him off their property. Before leaving, he warned her that he would return until he got what he wanted. In the present, Lee meets with Carter, and hands him an old photograph of Longlegs that she took years ago. The FBI soon tracks him down using the image, and catches him at a bus stop. During the interrogation, he reveals that his name is Dale Ferdinand Cobble. He continues to inquire about Lee, and when asked how he knows her, Longlegs reveals that she's a friend of a friend. He then begins to bizarrely sing happy birthday to Lee, saying that her birthday is approaching. Later, Browning, Carter, and Lee discuss the evidence against Longlegs, pointing out that his handwriting matches the letters. While it's clear that he worships the devil, this isn't a criminal offense in the United States. However, Lee insists that he couldn't have committed the crimes alone, and must have had an accomplice. The victim families must have received something, maybe a doll, from someone they knew and trusted. Lee wants to question him, but the detectives are hesitant because the man seems to personally know her. However, because the inverted triangle is still missing a date, and today is 13th Jan, they agree to let her speak with him. Following this, Lee enters the interrogation room, where Longlegs greets her with excitement, calling her almost birthday girl. When asked who he serves, he responds that he works for the man downstairs, i.e. the devil. Lee then inquires about his accomplice, but Longlegs pretends to act like a nun visiting the victims' families. Despite this, she continues to press him, and he finally asks her to question her mother instead. This shocks Lee, but before she can inquire further, Longlegs begins smashing his head multiple times on the table, eventually killing himself. In the aftermath of this incident, Carter accuses Lee of ruining everything. He says that they could have arrested the man and closed the case, but the situation has become more complicated. The detective also reveals that Carrie Camera has jumped off the roof of the psychiatric clinic, and he must have told her to do that when he saw her, just like he somehow told all the others. Later, she visits her mother's home to question her, accompanied by Agent Browning. Lee asks Browning to stay in the car while she goes inside. She'll call for reinforcements if necessary, to which the officer agrees. Lee then enters the house and looks around, but finds no one there. But surprisingly, during this, to Lee's utmost shock, she sees Ruth dressed in nun clothes, shooting Browning to death. This freaks Lee out, so she approaches her mother with a gun in hand. She soon notices Ruth aiming at a doll in front of her, which looks very much like young Lee. She questions her about why she did this, and Ruth mumbles that they caught Longlegs, and now he is free. Ruth then informs her daughter that she is also free now, and shoots at the doll, which causes a puff of black smoke emerges from Lee's head. Lee eventually loses consciousness, and a black smoke also emerges from the doll's metal orb. The scene then cuts to a flashback to 1974, where Longlegs returns to kill Lee's family, because she didn't have a father to carry out the murders. Ruth pleaded with him and begged for mercy to spare her daughter. As a result, they reached an agreement. Longlegs promised Lee would be spared if Ruth helped him and the devil carry out their plan. After that, Longlegs began living in Ruth's basement, crafting the satanic dolls. Ruth would then deliver these dolls to families, dressed as a nun, and pretending they were gifts from the church. It turns out that the dolls were infused with satanic whisperings, which brainwashed the fathers and convinced them to murder their families. At first, Ruth was regretful and even used to vomit after each crime. But over time, she became more willing to continue her role, driven by her desire to protect her daughter. In the present, Lee wakes up in her mother's basement, and quickly heads upstairs. She finds no sign of Ruth, but soon receives a voicemail in Longlegs' voice, reminding her that today is Ruby's birthday. Lee then realizes that this is the final murder he had planned to complete his satanic ritual, and rushes to Carter's house. Upon arrival, Anna and Carter greets her warmly, and everything seems normal at first. But then, as Lee goes inside, she is horrified to see her mother there, dressed in a nun's outfit. Her horror intensifies when she notices that the doll has already been opened. A freaked out Lee warns Carter that the woman is her mother and she's an accomplice of Longlegs. However, the man already seems to be possessed, and he becomes enraged with Lee. Anna then suggests cutting the cake, so she and Carter both head to the kitchen. Witnessing this, Lee asks her mother why she's doing this, to which Ruth reveals that if she doesn't, they both will die and burn in hell. At this moment, they hear Carter stabbing his wife to death in the kitchen. Ruth claims she's doing it for Lee, just like she has always done. Meanwhile, Ruby, possibly under the curse herself, is delighted by the evil doll. Just then, Carter arrives and prepares to kill his daughter, so Lee shoots him dead. This infuriates Ruth and she tries to stab the little girl. But Lee ends up fatally shooting her mother as well. In the final scene, our protagonist tries to shoot the doll, but her gun won't fire. Lee and Ruby, who seem emotionless, stand frozen in place, both staring at the doll. The movie then concludes with a flashback of Longlegs screaming "Hail Satan" before his death, and the handsome man blows a kiss to the viewers. Okay guys, thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.